Welcome to, again, the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Show, and we're really going to dive into it tonight. Again, what is the topic? We're going to be talking in point about things that disrupt hormones, and I want to start the topic with hormone disruptors. Hormone disruptors, very important because we're surrounded by them. Every day you get out, you get in your shower, you're probably bathing in hormone disruptors. You're using soaps and shampoos. Women, if you're putting on cosmetics, traditional cosmetics, you're being bathed in hormone disruptors. A lot of your lotions, a lot of your detergents and deodorants and things of that nature are going to contain hormone disruptors. So let's talk about what some of these are and where you can find them and how then to avoid them and use something instead that would have a much less detrimental effect on your body. So let's talk about, first and foremost, where do we get most of what are called xenoestrogens? These are some of the biggest hormone disruptors, and I'm going to spell that out for you. Xenoestrogen is with a Z or an X. Here you go. The spelling of xenoestrogen right there for you in case you want to go do more research on the topic. But xenoestrogens basically are extraneous artificial chemicals that are typically man-made or produced by some type of manufacturing that mimic estrogen. So they can artificially bind to your estrogen receptors, men and women, creating untoward hormonal changes or hormonal effects. Some of the biggest places we get artificial estrogens or xenoestrogens come from pesticides. We see them in plastics. We see them in industrial runoff. In the cosmetic industry, we see it in the production of different hygiene products. So what are they and how can we learn to recognize them? So pesticides, let's talk a little bit about pesticides first. One of the pesticides, one of the most predominant xenoestrogen-based pesticides is called atrazine, A-T-R-A-Z-I-N-E, atrazine. Now, atrazine, there we go. Atrazine has been being used as a weed killer, as a pesticide for years, and it's commonly used on a number of different plants, crops, weeds, not weeds, but herbs, etc. And one of the problems with it is it's not in small scale uses per se, but it's where we see farming communities dumping these atrazine chemicals in our rivers, in our river basins. What happens, a number of studies have been done in proving this and showing this, is that where we have high levels of atrazine dumping, we see females, or rather male animals, meaning fish, amphibians, like salamanders and frogs. We see the males actually developing ovaries and turning into females. In essence, they're sexually being changed. They're getting a form of, we call it a form of chemical castration. The estrogen strength of the atrazine is so concentrated and so powerful that we're seeing it change the species themselves from female into male variety, or rather vice versa, from male into female varieties. So think of this in terms of low dose exposure to you, not high dose exposure, because you're not swimming in the water in an area where a farmer's dumping atrazine, obviously, but think about that in terms of not buying organic food. So a life cycle or a lifestyle of eating foods consistently over time that are non-organic, creating or contributing to a severe burden, a severe estrogen overload. Now, think about that for a minute. Why do we worry? Why are we even concerned about xenoestrogens in our health? Well, big reasons why we're concerned if you're a female is because they contribute to dangerous and lethal forms of breast cancer. So breast cancer has been on a rapid rise over the last several decades, and xenoestrogen exposure is one of the reasons why we see this increase. Other types of diseases linked to hyperestrogenic behavior activity. Too much estrogen from xenoestrogens is it contributes to autoimmune disease. It contributes to the triggering of autoimmunity. So if you're being exposed to a lot of different type forms of chemical estrogens, you have a greater propensity to develop different forms of autoimmune disease. But remember, these xenoestrogens act like estrogen, so they can also disrupt your cycle. They can disrupt the normal flow of a woman's menstrual cycle, creating fluctuations in estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle-stimulating hormone, leading to diseases like endometriosis and fibrocystic breast disease and infertility. So these are big, big problems, and we're seeing more and more of these types of conditions with the onset of more and more xenoestrogens that we're being exposed to. So again, I went off on a tangent there, but I wanted to talk about what are some of the health implications for women. Now, for men, what are some of the health implications? Well, we're talking about low testosterone. We're talking about interference with testosterone. So for men, too much xenoestrogen can contribute to a number of different diseases, and one of them is in the form of testosterone disruption that can lead to less muscle. You remember that men are more muscly. Men have more muscle mass than women on purpose, right? It's Mother Nature's intention, and estrogen dominance in men actually reduces their capacity to generate and produce muscle even with the proper quantity of exercise. And that muscle loss, that's what we would refer to as atrophy, can lead to reduction in lymphatic flow, can lead to a reduction in immune system capacity, can lead to weaker muscles, can lead to a more feminine type of man. And so obviously that's not something that we want artificially induced through chemistry, right? Through chemicals. So certainly we want our men out there listening and following along to also avoid exposure to these artificial estrogen inducing compounds. So again, atrazine, one of the predominant pesticides that is commonly used that we see people getting exposure to on a regular basis. Now, another pesticide very commonly used is DDT. Now, fortunately, DDT was banned in the 70s. It was actually banned in 1972 from use, but it's still in the soil. This stuff stays in the soil for decades. We also still use this to treat or to fight the spread of malaria. So again, it's one of those things environmentally, you're not going to see DDT being used on crops in the agricultural industry. But let's say you're traveling to South America and they're spraying for mosquitoes. DDT is one of the primary ingredients that we're going to see being used to prevent bugs from spreading. So again, it's one of the areas where you can get exposure. Another compounder, another chemical, very, very common that people get exposure to, and it's not so much of a pesticide, although it can be used, and it's oftentimes used on produce, and that's dioxin. Dioxin is used as a bleaching agent. So where you're buying, women, if you're buying bleached Tampax or Maxi Pad or tampons, or feminine hygiene pads. Look, those things that are bleached, you can be getting the exposure to estrogen-based mimickers from the dioxin. You can also get it from bleached tea bags. So again, that's men and women alike. You can get it from bleached coffee filters. So again, you're looking for unbleached when you're looking for teas and you're buying these types of things. You're looking for unbleached products because again, it's that dioxin that's used as a bleaching agent in those. So those are some of the primary exposures that we're going to see people getting in terms of xenoestrogens in some of the food. Now, there are others, and I'm going to talk about food specifically here in a minute, but I want to get into more of the chemical exposures as well tonight. Plastics. If you drink out of plastics, if you eat out of plastics, if you eat off of plastics, you have the potential to be exposing yourself to a number of different forms of xenoestrogens. These types of estrogens are called phthalates. Phthalates are, again, you've heard of BPA. So like it's really popular right now for these BPA, plastic BPA free water bottles or containers. And that, of course, they are BPA free, but they still have other phthalates in them. They still have other plastics that mimic estrogen that act as xenoestrogens. So I call it window dressing. It's popular to buy BPA-free plastic water bottles, even though they still have phthalates that can mimic estrogen, just not BPA. So a lot of manufacturers are touting, oh, this is so wonderful. We have BPA-free this and BPA-free that. But in reality, you're still getting that exposure to different types of phthalates in those products. So don't recommend. I recommend if you're going to use, water bottle that you carry around your water, and definitely go with either a stainless steel or a glass type jar or container, because those are going to be the least inert and the least toxic interacting for you. Now, if you're going with stainless steel, make sure you buy something made here in the good old US of A, because if you're buying from China, look, we see all kinds of lead and other contaminants in China-based products on a regular basis. There are recalls and there are toxic ingredient identifications when we look at things that are made in China. So I would try to avoid that as much as you possibly can. And if you're buying stainless steel, make sure you're buying from an American company. Other types of compounds that we see, again, the phthalates used to make the plastics, but other components that we will commonly see as a chemical agent for where we'll get phthalates and parabens. Paraben is another very common estrogen, is in cosmetics. So women, if you're using, base and mascara, if you're using the blush and the lipsticks and all the different types of, face paints, basically understand if you're buying just your traditional brands, you're probably being exposed to massive quantities of artificial xenoestrogens. Again, that are contributing to a number of different forms of disease, predominantly cancers and autoimmunity. So you can buy natural cosmetics that don't have the parabens, that don't have the phthalates, that are free of the toxic ingredients that are xenoestrogen mimickers. You just have to find good quality companies out there to find them from. One of the big companies I recommend is actually a couple. One is Anne Marie Gianni. They've got a great line of products, hygiene-based products and lotions and skincare products. And another is the Spa Doctor. Both of these companies sell products that are basically created to work well but not contain all of the bad side effects from the artificial chemicals, compounds, and estrogens. So find a good, reputable company that's doing it right, that's making them organic, and that's producing them in the right way so that you're not exposing yourself to these estrogens, these xenoestrogens. Again, xeno meaning artificial, chemically derived estrogens on a daily basis. Because think about it like this. If you're bathing in unfiltered water or showering in unfiltered water, you're breathing in the steam that contains the chemicals used to bleach and filter your water that have xenoestrogen-like compounds or effects. Then when you get out of that shower, you're putting or applying your cosmetics. And so now you're getting exposure to those elements. Then you're applying some type of potential lotion to moisturize your skin. And if it's full of parabens and phthalates, you're getting exposed in that way. Or even if you're using something as innocent as a petroleum jelly, remember the compounds in petroleum jelly are estrogen mimickers as well. So you're getting exposure that way. And then after all of that, right, you're going off to work or going off to start your day, and you're taking with you your plastic water bottle because you want to stay hydrated. So you're getting exposure to those plastic chemical phthalates and BPA and other types of bisphenol chemicals that mimic estrogen. So every part of the day contains some type of artificial estrogen exposure. And we haven't even begun talking about the non-controllable part of the environment, which is if you live in an industrialized area, it's in the air. You're going to breathe it. So we can't control the industry, but what we can control is our direct exposure internally and on our skin. And we can filter our indoor air at home, but it's a lot harder to control that when you do go out into the environment and the rest of the world. So because you can't control the air, you want to control what you put in your body and what you put on your body. Those are the two big control points that you have. So you need to make sure that you're exercising them. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about some of the xenoestrogen contaminated foods, because we've been talking about chemicals, but it's not just the chemicals. So it's not just your cosmetics, your healthcare products. It's not just, it's not just those things, but it's also food itself. One of the most highly contaminated food that you can, or types of food that you can eat with xenoestrogens is fish. And I'm not talking about wild caught fish. I'm talking about some of, especially if you live in the Great Lakes area, a lot of that water is highly contaminated with industrial runoff, and a lot of the fish that comes out of those lakes are very, very high in different forms of xenoestrogen. So so that's one aspect, and those are wild caught fish. They're wild caught lake fish, but they're still contaminated because they come from a contaminated water basin. But we also want to look at our farm raised fish. If you're eating the farm raised salmon, for example, or tilapia, what are they feeding those fish? Predominantly, they're feeding them genetically modified corn and soy feed that have been doused in pesticides. And again, these pesticides mimic estrogen. They're forms of xenoestrogen. So not only do the fish get the xenoestrogen from the pesticide in the feed that they're being fed, but if they're being fed high quantities of soy, soy is a different animal altogether because it's what we consider to be a phytoestrogen. Now, there are good and bad phytoestrogens, and a lot of that depends on who you are. Phyto means plant, estrogen, obviously the hormone. There are plant types of estrogen-based hormones, but if we feed fish heavy quantities of genetically modified soy, then that fish meat itself is going to be an overburdened estrogen load on your body, especially if you're eating it on a consistent basis. So if we want to avoid, overly burdened estrogen-based fish, we want to really go for or look for a free-range or wild-caught type of fish, predominantly ocean-based fish. And I know some of you are saying, well, what about Fukushima? What about the radiation? What about the contamination of the oceans? I agree. There's contamination in the oceans. We're not going to 100% fight all the contamination. So if you're going to eat fish, you want to get the best of the least of the worst, or the best of what is available. And remember, the ocean is a lot bigger body of water than a lake. So there's a lot more room for the ocean to have the capacity to dilute the chemicals that are being dumped in it. We're not going to stop chemicals 100% from being dumped in our oceans, but the dilution factor is much, much greater. So the concentration is going to be a lot less than what you might get in a lake or a contaminated river. So keep that in mind. Look for wild caught fish, preferably caught out of the ocean, and preferably in the least contaminated waters that we have. So we're looking Pacific Northwest. We're looking for far North Atlantic, colder waters where you're getting that fatty fish with what we've talked about in past episodes with high levels of omega-3 concentration as well. So other contaminated foods that contain artificial estrogens or artificial xenoestrogens or hormones is if you're eating just the standard cattle, your standard beef, the stuff that the cows are locked in pens and fed, nothing but grain that's genetically modified grain that's been doused in pesticide as well. So again, you're getting it from what the cow eats, but then you're also getting it from the antibiotics and the other hormones that are being added to the meat. The hormones that are added to the meat or added to the feed, not to the meat, added to the feed itself. All of these create a greater estrogenic burden, a xenoestrogenic burden. So if you're eating, let's just say again, you're eating contaminated fish, you're eating standard types of beef, and then add dairy to that mix, because if you're eating the dairy from those same cows that are being fed, all of that GMO grain and soy, then now it's coming through in the milk. And then many milk manufacturers also will combine that with recombinant bovine growth hormone. So there's another hormone, a growth hormone that's added to many of these milks that can also cause endocrine dysfunction in humans. And you don't want your children to be exposed to that, nor do you want yourself to be exposed to that. So again, fish, dairy farm animals, as well as just your standard feedlot animals, you want to really look for trying to avoid. Other contaminated foods are going to be just your non-organic produce. Non-organic produce, meaning that it's been sprayed with some form of pesticide. You're getting exposure in that way. And so the more you can buy organic or even grow your own, or even if it's not organic, if it's grown in a hothouse where they're not using pesticides, or a greenhouse where they're not using pesticides, that's an alternative, or that's an option. If it's grown by a local farmer who's not using pesticides but can't afford the organic label, but you have a relationship with the farmer, that's a better option. So, certainly you want to try to find organic if you're buying in the grocery store, but if you're buying conventional, again, you're getting exposure to a number of different forms of estrogen through the pesticide exposure on your food. So again, take this whole scenario. We've got, again, exposure from the air, exposure from the water, exposure from our food sources, exposure in hair dyes, exposure in hygiene-based products and soaps and lotions and shampoos, exposure in cosmetics, exposure in bleached items that we're using on a regular daily basis. Then this adds up to a lot of excessive estrogen that could potentially create or contribute to disease. So again, we want to go back and reverse engineer how we can minimize that exposure. If we're trying to minimize our exposure in water, certainly adding water filtration to the whole house is an ideal scenario. If you live in an apartment and you can't add a whole house water filter, then screw in a carbon-based carbon and KDF, GAC, granular activated carbon and KDF type filter onto the shower head to minimize your exposure to some of these things. If you have a whole house system, you can use those same two ingredients. The granular activated carbon and the KDF work very, very well to eliminate a lot of contaminants. If you're talking about your drinking water, reverse osmosis is one of the best forms of drinking of filtration you can do on your drinking water, because it pulls all of these different things out. And that is one of the ways that you can safely protect yourself from getting an overburdensome exposure, again, to the estrogens from your water. As far as cosmetics are concerned, I mentioned a couple of companies earlier, but look for quality companies that are not using these types of toxic estrogen-based items. And as far as your food, you want to look for wild caught, you want to look for free-range organic, you want to look for organic-based food items to minimize your overall exposure to the estrogenic burden. So all that being said, if you're not doing those things, what can this estrogen do? I was reading about this earlier. Somebody actually had it's misinformation. So what xenoestrogens are and what they're not. Xenoestrogens are artificial estrogens. They don't increase your estrogen, they increase your estrogen burden. And that's a very big difference, meaning they interact with your estrogen receptors to activate your genes to perform different functions. Remember that estrogen is a hormone that tells your DNA, it upregulates your DNA to perform certain things. And so depending on the tissue that we're talking about, whether it's the ovaries or whether it's in the brain or whether it's in the skin, there are different functions for estrogen and different types of estrogen receptors in all of these different types of tissues. But xenoestrogens tend to interact with all of these different types of estrogen-based receptors and upregulate them. And this is where it creates a hyperestrogen-like burden. So for many women, that hyperestrogen-like burden can cause a disruption in their cycle. So we see a lot of women develop premenstrual symptoms. So what are some of the symptoms associated with xenoestrogen overload? Well, number one, we're going to see cycle abnormalities. One of the biggest is we just don't see a regular 28-day cycle. We see it coming and going in either shorter periods of time or much longer periods of time. For many women, we're going to see excessive bleeding, and we're going to see excessive mood swings. We're going to see excessive, when I say excessive mood swings, I'm not just talking about, hey, I'm a little cranky today. I'm talking about severe swings. We're going to see in some, we're going to see hot flashes. And we're going to see excessive sweating and intolerance to heat. For many, we're also going to see infertility. Infertility is a big problem. It's a growing problem, especially in the United States, where we see more xenoestrogen-based exposures. So if you or someone you know is struggling from unexplainable infertility, you might just want to consider eliminating these things as soon as you possibly can to reduce your environmental estrogen exposure, to see if that's not one of the hormone disrupting elements of the fertility issue that you're having. Other things that excessive estrogens can create. If you're suffering with an autoimmune disease, many of you know me and you've been following me for a while, and you've read No Grain, No Pain, my best-selling book, No Grain, No Pain, and you know about the potential for gluten to cause autoimmune disease. But excessive estrogen can also contribute to autoimmune disease. So the more xenoestrogen exposure you get, now couple that with gluten and grain exposure, and you've got kind of a 1-2 punch that can contribute to or accelerate the pathway to an autoimmune disease. So if you have been diagnosed with any form of hypothyroidism like a Hashimoto's, or if you've got a diagnosis of any other common autoimmune diseases like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or celiac disease or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, there are a number of different skin forms of autoimmune disease like psoriasis or vitiligo and eczema, then you really need to look at your environmental estrogen load and exposure to see if you can mitigate that to basically help your body be able to naturally help recover from the autoimmune process. So again, very, very important that you that if you have or struggle with those types of conditions, that you look at this much more seriously, because many of you have already changed your diet, and give yourself a pat on the back for going grain-free. But if your burden of estrogen is too high, this can create a major problem. Now, how do we know if your burden of estrogen is too high? Because a lot of the standard blood tests and urine tests and saliva tests don't really test for xenoestrogen exposure, meaning they can measure your estrogen levels, your different kinds of estrogen. There are lots of different forms of estrogen. There are at least 6 known different metabolite forms of estrogen. And most doctors typically only measure, one. They typically, what's measured if you go to your traditional OB-GYN is something called estradiol. But there's estrone and estriol, and there's 16 hydroxylated forms of estrogen, and there's 4 hydroxylated forms of estrogen and 2 hydroxylated forms of estrogen. There are a lot of different, again, metabolites of estrogen. They don't all work the same, and they're not all the same. So if you're not measuring them all, you really don't get a good comprehensive picture of what your estrogen burden is. But then again, none of these things are xenoestrogen. So how do you know if you're being overexposed to xenoestrogen? You really don't. At this point, there's not a great test in humans to measure excessive xenoestrogen production. So you have to play it safe. You have to go on the side of looking at your environmental sources and exposures of xenoestrogens and really, really dial those in and eliminate them to the best of your ability and capacity. And I would recommend that that as a primary or a priority before you go looking and testing a bunch of hormone levels. Really try to dial in your artificial exposure to different hormones. Now, one I didn't mention a minute ago, and I want to mention it, and that's any of you that are taking birth control, or any of you that are taking estrogen-based drugs to normalize like menopausal type symptoms, to reduce hot flashes. I'm not saying that all forms of estrogen that are given pharmaceutically are necessarily bad, but many people get put on estrogens for the wrong reason. They get put on aggressive quantities of estrogen. And so one of your biggest sources of exposure, women especially, is if you're on any kind of estrogen replacement therapy or any kind of birth control therapy. And if you're on it for any length of time, it can cause major disruption in your internal endocrine system. So it's something you really have to weigh the risks of taking the medicine versus the benefit of contraception if that's the reason you're using it, because there are much safer forms of contraception that don't increase your risk for cancer and that don't increase your risk for other major endocrine dysfunction diseases that you should be considering using, as opposed to, again, artificial estrogen through medication. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a break here and just see what kinds of questions that we've got coming in. Again, if you're enjoying the show, hit the love button, hit the like button. Let me know that you're enjoying what I'm talking about. And make sure you share this with somebody who might be struggling with some of these issues. Boy, a lot of folks still chiming in. We've got Marie from Toronto, Canada. We've got Debbie from Australia, Loretta Ecker from Minnesota, Lisa from Oklahoma, Tara from Michigan, Barb from New Hampshire, all over the country and all over the world. So let's see here. Hope Elizabeth Welkers chiming in. Hello, Dr. O. I have been severely estrogen dominant for a number of years and am finally evening out at 51 after more than 10 years. I'm just wondering how much longer I have to take tons of progesterone now that my periods have not come since June. Any thoughts? Hope, I highly, first of all, hopefully you're working with a qualified doctor who's monitoring and measuring all this. And I'm imagine if you're on that much progesterone that you probably are, but I would make sure that they're running different tests to help analyze your estrogen, progesterone, and other hormones like DHEA and cortisol, and even your thyroid, because they all play an interactive weave with each other. And sometimes I see this very commonly in people that come to my office is they've had a little bit of estrogen testing done, a little bit of progesterone testing done, but they haven't had their adrenal glands checked and they haven't had other hormone levels that can influence estrogen checked. And so they're still struggling to try to figure it out. So my advice would be have your doctor run. There's a type of test that's pretty comprehensive. It's called a Dutch test, DUTCH. And I'll, just like the Dutch people, it's spelt the same way, Dutch. And it's a pretty comprehensive hormone test that measures a lot of the different metabolites of estrogen and progesterone and other things, cortisol, cortisone. And that's one test that can be used as a tool to help give you a broader picture of what might be going on. I would also combine that with serum estrogen and estradiol and estrone and estriol testing, as well as serum progesterone testing, in combination with follicle stimulating hormone, in combination with something called luteinizing hormone. So I would have that's what I would ask my doctor to run, all of those tests, and see if we can't see a more comprehensive picture about what's going on, because you may be missing something. It's possible that you're missing something if you're still severely estrogen dominant after 10 years. Shouldn't take 10 years to recover from an estrogen dominant situation if you're controlling the outside or the external variables. Now, remember, Hope, if you haven't gone grain-free or red, no grain, no pain, that's something that you definitely want to do, because a lot of your grains are estrogenic-based chemicals too. From a phytoestrogen standpoint, a lot of them are rich in plant-based estrogens, but also from a pesticide standpoint, a lot of them are heavy estrogen content because of the pesticide that's being used to grow them. But then even on top of that, in addition to that, you've got the effects of gluten. Gluten itself can be an endocrine hormone disruptor. So those would be all things that I might consider talking to my doc about and seeing if you can't get a handle on it. Okay, let's see here. Wow, Serbia. Maria, I guess that's how you pronounce it. Maria with a J at the end, Marija or Maria from Serbia. So all the way across the pond. Thanks for joining us. Let's see here. Amy from Houston. Hi, Amy. Had a good time with you and Tony at the Ren Fair a couple weeks ago. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. Dorothy from Michigan. Orlandis from Australia. Hi. Let's see. Next question. Or maybe comment. Julie, or rather Jenny, is choose chlorine-free products and unbleached paper products, including napkins, coffee filters, tea bags, sanitary products, diapers, baby wipes, toilet paper, and paper towels. Thank you for chiming in. So those of you who are wondering, Jenny has chimed in with a nice list of things that you might consider that are bleached with chlorine-based agents that you want to eliminate or reduce from your exposure or minimize your assault of estrogen-based chemicals. Okay. Here we go. Saw your interview on the 2017 Interpreting Your Genetics Summit today. When you use genetics, do you have a list of preferred genetic testing providers for nutrigenomics, particularly the direct-to-consumer? There is such a flood of providers. I'm hoping to narrow the list to just narrow the list. Let's see. This is I'm hoping to narrow the list to those that just test the 60, 70 variations that we can impact with nutrition and lifestyle. Thank you. Yeah, Angela, I mean, it depends on the patient. So there's not like, yeah, I mean, there are a number of different genetic tests that can be run, and we run a lot of different types of genetic tests, but a lot of that depends on the history of the patient. To just randomly sample, hundreds of different gene mutations or SNPs just without provocation or without reason is, in my opinion, for a practitioner to do that is really a mistake, because a lot of people then become victimized by their genetics and they try to interpret something that they need to do to manipulate their own genes when that's not maybe necessary. So a lot of it is just working with somebody who's super knowledgeable in nutrigenomics, but also the omic sciences, the different, and Chris Kresser and I talked about this on Friday, if you tuned into the live version on Friday, where we talked about genetics and talked about why you don't just want to go and run a bunch of genetic tests. Now, if you've got certain particular types of conditions, yeah, there are certain ones that we definitely want to look at. There's some, particularly for detoxification and for autoimmune disease, we really want to look at a battery of methylation genes, and there are 20 plus genes along that line. If you're talking about gluten sensitivity or suspecting gluten sensitivity, the only accurate way to ascertain that really truly is genetics. And most of your companies that are out there that do these what are called SNP platform testing don't measure the right genes or don't report the right things back to actually tell you whether or not gluten is an issue. So a lot of it is in, what is the history of the patient? What is their condition? What do we feel like might be playing a role genetically that's contributing from them recovering and getting better? And so a lot of that is just practitioner based. You just got to find a solid practitioner who knows what the heck they're talking about and not just running a test to run a test. So hopefully that's helpful for you. I know I didn't give you an exact answer, but hopefully that's helpful for you. Teresa's chiming in from Tennessee. Let's see here. Jada from Tennessee. Tennessee's representing tonight. Let's see here. Bobby's saying, I want to comment on this. Bobby Ann is saying, very discouraging. Toxins seem unavoidable. Yeah, they are. But here, understand this, Bobby. Look, toxins have always been a part of our life. They've always been a part of our environment. Toxins aren't new. You can walk into a natural pine forest and breathe in as many toxins, just of a different variety. Remember, plants release toxins as much as humans produce chemicals that can be toxic. It's not about 100% avoidance. It's about intelligent avoidance of an overburdensome load where we can control the variables. So don't feel overwhelmed by it, and don't feel fatalistic if you can't control 100% of everything. It's not about 100% control. Otherwise, we'd all just magically, we create a bubble that we could all walk around in, and that's just not a realistic way to live. So it's about controlling intelligently what you know to control, and doing intelligent things with your diet and lifestyle beyond that, right? The right diet, the right sunshine, getting adequate sleep, stress management, clean air as much as possible, clean water as much as possible, exercise, to your ability to tolerate it. Those are all the critical factors for keeping your body healthy. So it's about doing all those things and avoiding what we can avoid, but not stressing over what we can't, because the stress from not can create just as many problems for you as the toxins themselves. Laurie says China has organic labeling, but not subjected to the FDA requirements like organic labeling in the US. I agree. I don't recommend that you buy organic food if it's coming from China. Really, I don't recommend that you buy much from China if you can avoid it. One, for several reasons. One, I'm a patriot. I'm an ex-vet. Not an ex-veteran. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. And so support Americans, support American companies. Look, we've got to support our own people, and we've got to help our own people out. Not to be political or anything, but when you're buying from China, remember what are all the things that we've seen come out of China? Number one, we've seen baby food contamination of lead. We've seen pet food contamination of lead. We've seen contamination of chemicals that don't belong, that are banned in the US, and many products that come out of China. It's just not a trustworthy country. They sell us a lot of things that are not necessarily going to be great for us or even good for us. So if you can buy American, where we created laws and we created restrictions that are supposed to protect us, they're here. So buy from companies that are here, that are under the auspice of those laws, if you want to seek the protection of those laws. Otherwise, it's really, really hard when you're buying foreign-based products to get the same level of protection. Okay. Elizabeth Rodriguez saying, did I say Anne Marie? Yes, I did. And there's a link that we just put up to that if you want to find that company online. Yeah, so Amanda's asking the same question. Do I have links to those cosmetic companies? Yeah, if you follow the link we put up just a few minutes ago, you'll find links to both those companies. Let's see here. Elizabeth is saying, I love her skin products, but a bit expensive. Look, it's better to spend on something that's more expensive today than pay for cancer. I promise you, and from personal experience, one bout of cancer treatment, one round of chemo, radiation, and all that comes with it will far outpace anything you could ever imagine spending on cosmetics for the rest of your life, your daughter's life, your granddaughter's life. So spending on these types of products, again, and I know that, it's important that women feel confident in the way that they look, and it's important for men to feel comfortable and confident in their own skin. And so using these products is something that people do. But you don't want to compromise in this area. This, again, is one of the control points that we do have. So control what you can. Can you get premenopausal from these chemicals? Oh, I'm glad you asked that, Lisa, because here's the thing. I see women all the time come to me that think they're in menopause, but they're not in menopause at all. They're in what I call pseudomenopause. And the reason they're suffering from these symptoms is because they're being overburdened by environmental estrogens, or because they're eating foods that are too abundant in estrogen, or because they're eating foods that are endocrine disruptors. So to answer your question, yes, you can get premenopausal and even menopausal from these types of chemicals. I've actually seen women who thought they had gone through menopause have their cycles return after we got the chemical exposure out of their lifestyle and out of their diet. So yes, absolutely it can, and it is a possibility. Let's see here. Maybe my pond fish is okay. Yeah, maybe it is. It just depends on what you've got around you. If you've got farmers around you that are crop dust spraying, you're getting that runoff in your pond. But if you've got, a relatively large piece of property around you and there's not a bunch of people spraying around you, then your pond fish probably are okay. Just don't throw corn bits into the water to feed them. Let them eat off of the natural, the natural plants and smaller fish in the pond itself. Let's see here. Lai is chiming in. Yes, videos and love your products. They save me. Well, I'm so glad that you're saying that. I'm so glad that my products were able to help you. We try to create the highest quality and the highest type of brand of product that help people restore and recover without the risk of that gluten or grain exposure. Question. Cindy is asking, what brand of fish oil is good? Cindy, there's a brand I recommend. It's called Omega Max. You go to glutenfreesociety.org and you can pick it up, but it's molecularly distilled fish oil. There's absolutely zero heavy metal contamination. There's no PCBs. There's none of these phthalates or other chemicals that you can get exposure to when you're eating regular fish. And it's very, very concentrated to contain high levels of EPA and DHA. So Omega Max is the brand. You can get that on glutenfreesociety.org. Question from Ashley: what milk would you give children? Well, depending on the age, if they're over the age of 3, I wouldn't give them milk. Milk is not a necessity for human health, especially milk from different species of animals. You know, we've all been sold a false bill of goods from the milk industry that we somehow, milk does a body good and we need milk as a necessity, as a staple in the human diet. We don't need the dairy from other animals. As a matter of fact, humans lose their ability to digest the sugar in milk after around the age of 3. And most people start to become more and more lactose intolerant after the age of 3. So don't really recommend milk if your kids are over that age. Now, if they're under that age, I recommend human milk. Human milk is the absolute best, #1 form of milk you can feed your child. We can get into the pros and cons of breastfeeding and breast milk and formula milk another time, because it's really a deep topic, and I don't want to do it disservice by just kind of airbrushing it. But again, hopefully that helps you. I don't think children don't need milk. It's not my opinion. It's fact. Children don't need milk to get calcium, and they don't need milk for strong bones. They just need a variety of healthy foods that they're not allergic to, and they need a loving, caring environment. Elle is chiming in. Hello from Greece, all the way from Greece. Hi, Elle. Can someone have primary amenorrhea due to diet? Yes, they can. And that would not be primary amenorrhea. It would be dietary-induced amenorrhea that was given the wrong diagnosis. How about due to gluten sensitivity? Yes, absolutely due to gluten sensitivity. I did a video on this very topic not too long ago. If you go to Gluten Free Society and just type in how gluten affects hormones, you'll pull up that video on that whole topic. I never developed menstruation, and I have I'm going to assume that means, and I have all medical exams from PCOS to Turner syndrome to hypothalamic MRI, etc. No one can explain it medically. There's no reason I shouldn't have. I'm going to assume you mean a cycle. Go buy No Grain, No Pain and start chapter 7 and chapter 8 tonight, and get back with me in 30 days. Chime into the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show in 30 days and let us know, did your cycle return? Now, it may take 60 days, so stay with it for 30, and if it doesn't return, stay with it for 60, and then chime in and let me know. Because if you've had all those tests and you've had all that diagnostic workup done and you're still not menstruating, that's going to be a problem for you long term. So I've seen countless women have their cycles return as a result of the No Grain, No Pain diet protocol. So it's something I'd highly recommend that you check out and do. Let's see here. Okay, so some of you are asking for links, and my team, they're putting up the links as we're talking, so hopefully those are showing up for you. Lai's chiming in. Love your book. Thanks, Lai. I'm glad you loved it. I loved writing it, and it was definitely a work of passion for me. A lot of you chiming in on symptoms. I'm assuming you're wanting me to talk about these things. Okay, so here's a question. What is known about xenoestrogens in scleroderma? Misty always got great questions. Look, the reality is this: scleroderma is a form of autoimmune disease, and many times people pigeonhole it as a disease, as a unique and distinct entity. I don't tend to do that. Now, that's not as an insult to the scleroderma community as much as it is saying that, look, all forms of autoimmune disease have the same progenitor. They have the same trigger genesis, right? So what are those triggers? What are the big triggers for autoimmune disease, whether we're talking about scleroderma or whether we're talking about Hashimoto's or whether we're talking about lupus? Doesn't matter. There's the same triggers as far as we know in science. Those triggers, very simply put, number one is food, and the most studied, well-studied form or trigger from food actually has to do with gluten and grain. Number two trigger is chemical exposure, and xenoestrogens fall under the realm of chemical exposures. Number three is infections, and there are a number of different infections that can contribute to or can be a trigger for autoimmunity, including things like Lyme disease, including Bartonella, including things like Klebsiella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. There's just a vast variety of different types of infectious microorganisms that can trigger or contribute to the triggering of autoimmunity. And then the fourth trigger is nutritional deficit. The most well-studied nutrient linked to autoimmune disease, including scleroderma, is vitamin D deficiency. So those, I hope that answers your question, because I don't say that to like belittle the diagnosis of scleroderma, but I say that to say, look, yes, there's an association with with xenoestrogens in all forms of autoimmunity, including scleroderma. The great question from Barb here: how do I feel about bioidentical hormones? First of all, they're not truly bioidentical. So the name is somewhat of a misnomer. And that being said, it doesn't mean they can't be helpful. Many women go on what are being referred to as bioidentical hormones and feel much, much better. Where we see women being candidates more specifically for these types of therapies is if they've had, a hysterectomy, particularly a full hysterectomy, not a partial. If you kept your ovaries but had your uterus removed, then you're still at the possibility that you're still producing adequate quantities of estrogen on your own and don't need it. But so again, I'm not opposed to these types of hormone therapies, but you have to have a really good justified reason, and you have to rule out the triggers as to why the hormone abnormality might be there in the first place before this is my opinion, before I would recommend or refer somebody out to seeing an expert in hormone therapy. In essence, it's not 100% right for everyone, but a lot of doctors are prescribing it for everyone. And I don't agree with that 100%. I think you've got to look at other things first. Remember that all of your hormones require vitamins and minerals to be produced. So for example, if we're talking about estrogen, if you don't have B6 and vitamin C and zinc, you can't make estrogen effectively. But if your doctor's giving you estrogen, in even a bioidentical estrogen, but it's never measured those other nutrients, then you may not need estrogen. You may just need those nutrients to help your body make its own estrogen. So again, looking at the underpinnings of where estrogen comes from, to me, that's a more important thing to investigate first than to just prescribe or have somebody referred out for bioidentical hormone therapy. Beth is asking, is HRT okay? That's hormone replacement therapy. Again, it's okay in select people. Not everybody's the same. The best way to know if it's okay for you is to have that conversation with your doctor about whether or not it's okay for you. And again, my advice as far as doctors are concerned is get with, if you're female and looking for a good quality OB-GYN who's well-versed in functional medicine, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're generally going to go to OB-GYN, and a lot of them throw estrogen around like it's candy without, I'm not going to say they don't have, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but look, the reality is it's an overprescribed medication. And even the American Endocrinology Society says that women should not be being put on estrogen to the quantity and to the levels that we see it being prescribed because of the increased risk for heart disease, the increased risk for cancers. So, it's got to be something that's weighed very, very carefully before just indiscriminately being put on. Let's see here. Brenda from Florida. Hi, Brenda, and thanks for reading No Grain, No Pain. Glad you enjoyed it. Annie King, any tips for treating eczema? I keep using cortisone creams, and I know they are not good long term. So, tips for natural support of the skin, I think, would be more, because look, treating eczema, we don't treat eczema. We look at the body and we give the body what it needs, and we take away what's interfering, and the body heals itself. So we don't need to treat it. We just support your body's ability to deal with it. And so typically where eczema, in my experience, where eczema is triggered is we either see food, undiscovered or undisclosed food allergies. And very, very common to see, well, obviously gluten and grain, but also dairy. Dairy is a big, big trigger for eczema. Oftentimes we'll see eczema as being triggered by yeast overgrowth. So have your doctor look to rule out whether or not yeast overgrowth is part of your issue or part of the problem. Zinc deficiency, vitamin A deficiency can trigger eczema like rashes and lesions. So having those levels checked as well. If you're using cortisone creams long-term, you're in for a heck of a problem. You've got to, again, get with your doctor. But long-term use of steroid creams will thin your skin. They'll cause calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D disruption, and that can lead to a host of other types of problems. But it can also cause adrenal dysfunction, water retention, muscle loss, and give you a whole lot of other types of problems to deal with. So I don't recommend the long-term use of any form of cortisone cream because, again, what does cortisone cream do? It masks the inflammation. It basically stops the inflammation without ascertaining why the inflammation is there. And that can be a problem because, again, it's like putting a Band-Aid on an infected wound. The Band-Aid hides the infection, but the infection is still there. And if you let it fester long enough, it's going to become a much bigger and worse problem for you long term. Okay. In terms of xenoestrogens and gluten sensitivity, what products are out there that can be used to avoid both? Is gluten in beauty and hygiene products as bad as taking them orally? It depends on the person, Anna. I've seen gluten in hygiene products and skin-based products create just as bad of a reaction in some people, but not all. I highly recommend gluten-free skin products, though, as well as paraben and phthalate-free skin products. So those brands we posted up earlier fit both of those rules, fit both of those bills. They're grain-free, gluten-free, but also they're paraben and phthalate-free. Tracy's asking, is the Dutch test done through Quest Labs or LabCorp? No, it is an independent lab. It's a specialized independent lab. So it is not done through either LabCorp or Quest. Elizabeth's asking if I consult with people outside of Texas. Yeah, I do. You can get with, you can get with my office. You can call my office, or you can actually go to the website, drpeterosborne.com, and there's a big Origins Healthcare logo. That's the name of my clinic. If you click on that, you get our phone number there. Let's see here. Boy, the questions just don't stop, and I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to answer a few more. One near and dear to my heart. Angelica, I have RA and have a lot of joint pain. My diet is gluten-free along with the recommended diet in your book. How long before I feel, I'm going to assume you didn't finish that sentence, feel better maybe is what maybe you want to say. Angelica, it may be, I mean, for a lot of people going on chapter 7 and 8 in my book, No Grain, No Pain, you're going to, some people are feeling better within 30 days. It just depends on how long you've been following it and if there's any other things that are going on that are part of your problem. So, because here's the thing, in my experience with RA, and I've dealt with a lot of RA, is that some people have an infection. Some people have bacteria that are creating endotoxins that are leading to joint pain, and they're not addressing the bacteria with diet change. Now, the diet change is equally important, and you want the diet change to be there. But for example, if you have a Klebsiella that's producing an endotoxin that mimics your joints, and your immune system is attacking your joints because it's confused, then you're not going to see that dramatic improvement within the 30-day diet plan. That's part of why in the book, if you go back and review chapter 10, chapter 10 is all about functional medicine. The reason I wrote that chapter is because there's always going to be outliers who go on the chapter 7 and 8 diet and they're still struggling. And the reason why is because there are other elements that they haven't had addressed that need to be addressed as well. So some of those elements might be vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Some of those elements might be infection, hidden infection. Some of those elements might be things like you're still getting exposure to other things in the environment that are suppressing your immune system's ability to come back online. So a lot of that can be tested for, which is what I highly recommend in working with a skilled functional medicine doc, is you get these things tested for, and then you can make meaningful adjustments to your diet and to your lifestyle based on exactly what your biochemistry is saying, as opposed to just following the diet. Now, again, many people are benefited by the diet alone, but if you're still struggling, finding somebody who can apply the rules of chapter 10 would be ideal for you. Good questions. Someone wrote, they feel better when they went back to wheat. How can that be? I am so glad this question is coming up. Here's why. So understand that in wheat, there is a type in the gluten fragment there. If we isolate it down, there's a type of protein called gluteomorphin. Gluteomorphin is a very, very powerful morphine-like compound that reduces pain. So many people that are actually reacting to the grain and having inflammation in other areas of their body, the grain is masking the inflammation because it actually, the gluteomorphin in it is reducing their capacity to interpret pain. So the grain acts as something that creates inflammation in one area, but also acts as a pain reducer in another light. And so it can mask its own toxicity. This is not common in a lot of people. This is not something we see in a lot of people, but there are people that when they get off of grain, they feel worse because they're going through morphine withdrawal. And it's gluteomorphin withdrawal. Just for the same, when we see somebody taking like a chronic highly addictive opiate medication, pain medication, when they quit it cold turkey, they feel worse. They feel more pain. They feel horrible. They want to end their lives in some cases. Their pain comes back so greatly. So this could be the case with that person who mentioned they felt better going back on wheat. Could be the case. My advice in those types of scenarios is if you're struggling to get off and you feel worse, then sometimes we have to wean you down. And so part of that process and that weaning would be reduce your overall exposure and put you on a really high dose of enzyme that helps to basically cleave and break down gluten as much as possible. It's a temporary solution as you're trying to make the weaning process work. Ultimately, you have to get off grain if you are gluten sensitive, but that is an element that can occur, is that it's that gluteomorphine can actually hide or mask the pain of the inflammation that the grain is creating, making it for a very, very odd looking clinical picture. And only doctors who are very versed and very skilled in this knowledge and information can really pick up on this and recognize this. So that could very well be what was happening. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question, and then we got to wrap it up because I got to go to the gym tonight. I haven't been to the gym yet today. So, Sonia, so glad I found you. Was diagnosed with RA 1 year ago. I noticed my pain was worse when I ate all grains. I'm in the process of healing my leaky gut, and as I have suffered with stomach ache all my life. The doctors here in Australia will not recognize diet, just medication. I'm out to prove them wrong. Reading your book, No Grain, No Pain. Love your work. Thank you. Sonia from the Alces from Australia. Well, that wasn't a question, but thank you, Sonia, for chiming in. And yeah, you're right. A lot of doctors don't address diet. Okay, I promise I'll take one more question. Let's see here. I don't know if this is a question. It looks like it's a question. So, okay, vitamin D, done everything possible to raise by taking vitamin D. It doesn't work to raise. My calcium levels are so high, and now they think the vitamin D caused it. Maybe they did. This depends. I've been taking all vitamin D and told not to take, and now taking magnesium cod liver oil and getting some sun with that. The sun wasn't helping before. I'm told most shouldn't take vitamin D and need the cofactors instead. Thoughts? If your calcium levels were going high, it depends. So there's a lot of variables and scenarios here, Danique, and that is, it could have been that your calcium levels were high before you started taking vitamin D because you have a parathyroid problem. So have your doctors measure your PTH, your parathyroid hormone. The other thing that you might want to have somebody do is check your total overall nutritional status, measuring not your serum calcium, but your intracellular calcium. It's a different animal altogether. Sometimes serum calcium is high, not because you're calcium toxic because of too much vitamin D, but because the calcium is not penetrating into your cells. And that's that can be something different entirely. We need vitamin K to do that. And we need magnesium to be able to get calcium inside your cells. So you might have a vitamin K deficiency or a magnesium deficiency as well. But testing your nutritional status comprehensively would be the best thing that you can do to try to get a bigger picture, a better picture of what actually is going on. The other thing I would highly encourage you to ask your doctors to do is measure and make sure that your kidneys are functioning properly, because sometimes the kidneys are not filtering out calcium very well, and that's why the calcium levels become high in the serum, and that's not a good thing. You don't want high calcium in your serum. So make sure that your kidney function is being measured and checked as well. And I would check not only kidney function tests like blood urea nitrogen and creatinine testing and your glomerular filtration rate. These are all important tests that can be measured. But I would also potentially, if you suspect autoimmunity, I would have them check for antibodies against your kidney, because there's a form of kidney disease. Again, if there's a kidney problem, there's a form of autoimmune kidney nephritis that can create a lot of problems with your capacity to regulate vitamin D and calcium. So that was a lot of things, I know, but again, I get with your doctor and start exploring with some of those options. Okay. Well, we can talk all night, folks, and I really, really enjoy these sessions with you, and I'm so glad that so many of you find them helpful and useful. And what I'd like you to do is help me get this word out there. We got to help a lot of people. Remember, there's 100 million chronically sick people in the world that need this type of information. So let's share. Make sure you're sharing this video with your family members and your friends who might find it useful, and make sure you're liking it. And we will get back with you again next week. And if you've got topic ideas, something you really want to see me cover, and and you'd like to see me cover it, make sure that you chime in on our Facebook page and ask for a particular topic, or make sure you email us back at glutenology@gmail.com and ask us to cover different topics for you, because we're happy to serve you and help yourself find better health. So again, this is Dr. Osborne with the Pick Dr. Osborne Brain Show. We will see you next Monday evening, 6 to 7 Central Standard Time. As always, have a great night and have a great week. Take care.